Okay. This week, we're going to look a little bit at the idea of what rubrics are and how to use them and how to write them. We're going to use the state's example rubric for ongoing assignment, much like we used the examples from AP last year. So I will pull those up as well. But, all right, let me just go ahead and get started. Again, we're going through the reading rope, and I want you to know that I like the book because it pulls apart and helps us understand why writing is so difficult. I continue to want to make sure that you know that it's really not that simple, right? That just like this rope weaves together, the writing rope, everything needs to become tight. And so our students need to do a lot of things all at once. Having a deep appreciation for that fact will make us better writing instructors. And I just want to keep going and asking you to think about, what does this tell you when you don't get the results that you want? How might the writing rope help you to understand what to go back and do differently, right? What to go back and reteach, maybe where to give some extended instruction, maybe where to offer some supports and scaffolds. Last week, we looked at this idea of how to construct a prompt. I left feedback on your discussion board posts, but what I want you to think about here is that we want to always have three parts to our prompt. The first part is kind of inviting our students in, framing the conversation. If we think of writing as a conversation, we need to kind of give them some parameters, some introduction to that conversation, ask the task of our students, and then give them some understanding of the expectations, right? And so it is not to say that that part 3 is going to be the full rubric, okay? Generally, after the part 3, I highlight the things that I think are very important to this particular assignment. So some of you had assignments that were literary analysis, right? Analysis of character or analysis of point of view. And so I think in that part 3, I might highlight the importance of textual evidence. And I also, if I've been working on them, I might talk about the importance of citing correctly. So those are things like tasks that maybe I've been working on. So while my rubric might have everything that good writing, it might include the entire reading rope or writing rope, I mean, my sort of prompt might highlight those elements of the rope that I found particularly important, okay? And I want you to think about the fact that while we're talking about a rubric, it's really important that we not just introduce the rubric at the conclusion. We want the students looking at that rubric and using that rubric to guide their planning, to guide their writing, to guide their revision, right? So this is the original cognitive model by which we have these writing stages. I think you can see how these directly correlate into these writing stages that most of us are comfortable with. And I want you to think, though, do we use the rubric enough throughout this process? And I would argue that we often don't. I mean, I don't want in the brainstorming section, I don't want to put the kids, the rubric in front of the students. I want them to be able to think freely. But once I've introduced the task and really kind of the structure of the assignment, I need to make sure that my rubric is there and helping to offer guidance for my students as well, because they're constantly making decisions throughout this process. So what do we need in a good, sorry, I see that this is, okay. What do we need in a good rubric? I'm sorry. We really want to have the performance levels, right? So an example might be weak, satisfactory, strong. You might think about, do you want 3 performance levels or 4 performance levels? There's arguments that can be made for both. Sometimes, though, I think for purposes of students, it might be overwhelming. So I would stick to no more than 3 or 4 performance levels. We want to have the assessment criteria. What are the knowledge and skills that we're going to be looking at? And on a writing rubric, those might include categories such as clarity, organization, and grammar, context and purpose, or content development, convention, source and evidence, control of syntax and mechanics, or things like thesis, structure, use of evidence, logic, reasoning, and mechanics. That's a lot. I would never write a rubric with all of these ideas, but I want you to think about the fact that there's a lot of categories that we could put in that we want to think about what essential knowledge and skills are required. So once I've decided on my criteria, and I might go 3 to 6, I would not probably have more than 6. I even think 6 might be overwhelming. And I decide what my performance levels are. My rubric then can really sort of write itself, right? I like to go with the strong when I'm writing a rubric. I like to begin by writing what I think a strong paper. So if I had clarity, I might write what a strong paper looks like in terms of clarity. Then I would cut and paste it and think about what examples, what might be different in my satisfactory. So what things might not be present in that satisfactory that were present in the strong. And then for the week, what would be missing for sure. So one thing you might consider is, and this is challenging in a different way, there is this thing called holistic rubrics, and what holistic rubrics are good for. I would never use a holistic rubric for anything that I'm giving back to my students, but let's say it's the end of the quarter, the semester, you're working on finals. You have 120 papers, right, that you have to grade, and you have to grade them quickly within the week so you can get your semester grades turned in. That is a place where holistic rubrics are really good. Let's say you're working on a teacher-based team, you want to look at student samples to identify what's happening across levels. That might be another place where holistic rubrics are good. But what this does is it uses the criteria from your writing rubric in a way that includes all the criteria at once. So here's weak, satisfactory, strong. So weak thesis is unclear due to writing style, organization ideas, and or grammatical errors. Satisfactory, overall thesis is clear. Writing style and organization mostly support the thesis. And strong, introduction includes a thesis statement. Writing style and organization offer ample evidence to support the overall thesis. These are good tools for us when we need to go through student data very quickly and efficiently, right? But what they're not going to let us know is they're not going to let us know what essential skills and knowledge might be missing, looking for patterns. So I would only use this in very, very specific reasons, or for very, very specific reasons. But I did want to let you know that there is this holistic rubric out there that sometimes as a writing teacher, you may be in a position to use, and it might be appropriate to use. It would not be inappropriate for a student to just get weak and no real understanding of why that might be. Because is it because I don't have a thesis? Is it because I didn't organize my ideas? Is it because I had too many distracting grammar or usage errors? I wouldn't know if all I got was that, right? And so we want to think about this. And we want to think about the descriptors. So when we're creating something that is student facing, we want to make sure that the students know that what we're going to look for. So our descriptors should be observable and measurable behaviors. We want to make sure that we're using parallel language across the scale. And we want to indicate the degree to which a standard is met. So we want to make sure that we are distinguishing between a weak, a satisfactory, and a strong, right? We want to make sure that the descriptors indicate the degree to which that standard is met. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you a link to Ohio's rubric for informative and explanatory writing. It's for the 6 to 12 OSTs. We're going to use this rubric. This is obviously the exemplar from the state. It's also because as teachers, we want to align everything to the state standards. We know that this is aligned to the state standards because it's written by the same people who write the standards. But we're going to look at it and we're going to think about how this rubric, which is really for the most part written in a language that is meant to inform educators. So it is written in a way that helps you to understand what you need to focus in on as a writing teacher. We want to think about how we can use this, right, to create a more student-friendly tool for students so that they can see rubrics as guidance. And so I'm going to have you in the discussion board spend some time looking at the holistic rubric for grades 6 to 12. Identify what you like about the rubric and then consider how it might need to be modified for your own personal classroom use. In your post, explain how you might change the rubric to create more student-friendly guidance. So how can we use this and the language in here and the descriptors in here and the criteria embedded in here? How can we use it to help us as teachers, but also what might we need to do differently to turn what is really a teacher-facing document into an appropriate student-facing document? Because rubrics are really, really important. I will also give you some additional links for you to read on your own if you're interested in writing good rubrics. But otherwise, we will just continue on through the rest of the writing room. All right. Thank you. And I hope you all have a good week.